Some backstory. I live in an area where the only large animals around are deer. This is going to sound cliche, but this happened in a national park. This happened in early fall, around 3 years ago. Me and a friend of mine decided to go down to the water and check out a small boat which had run ashore and was left abandoned. We walked to the boat around 9 p.m. and it was nothing special. Nothing was on board, and there was nothing interesting about it, so we decided to keep walking down the trail the boat was on. The trail is lined in tall grass, maybe 5 to 8 feet high, on both sides. Up ahead, the trail curved, so you couldn't see ahead more than 20 feet or so. As we walked around the curve, we noticed something walk out of the tall grass, maybe 15 feet ahead on the right, and cross into the tall grass on the left. It's hard to describe what I saw, but it looked like a torso with legs and a head, completely white, with no other extremities, probably about 5 feet tall. It just casually walked across our path, not noticing us, right into the tall grass. My friend was noticeably shook up, and so was I, but I simply wrote it off as the moonlight illuminating a deer oddly. She accepted that answer, and we walked back to my car. Afterward, we saw some deer hanging out in the grass a few miles away, and we both agreed what we witnessed was no deer. It turns out, a man was found dead along the water a week or two prior to my sighting. I'm not the biggest believer in spirits, but it would make sense to me. I've gone back with a group of people hoping to see something again, but I never have. Everyone I tell writes it off as a joke, calling it the walking legs. My husband and I recently went and watched The Wolf of Snow Hollow, and I was gushing to my in-laws how fun the movie was. While on the topic of werewolves, I shared this story this past weekend with them, and I creeped them out. Years ago, I was working at a veterinary clinic, and I was kennel staff. We provided dog boarding, and I frequently worked the weekends tending to the dogs, making sure they were walked, fed, and cleaned up after. It was a pretty fun job. One weekend, we had 2 big huskies staying with us. In retrospect, one of them was particularly tall and fluffy, so it might have been a Malamute or Mutt or whatever. Regardless, they were great dogs, and they didn't poop or pee in the kennel. They played outside great, and were super friendly with me. In a word, well behaved. Monday rolled around, and their owners were there to pick them up. For safety, when it came to big dogs, we were only to bring up one at a time from the kennels to the front lobby. I followed that protocol, grabbing the smaller one first. Before I proceed, I have to explain the kennel setup, so this next part makes sense. Where we kept larger dogs was against the far wall of the kennel room. These were large indoor runs, about 15 by 15 feet, and both huskies stayed together in one such run over that weekend. The walls were made of stainless steel for easy disinfecting, and about 15 feet in height. The front wall of the kennel was the special kind of reinforced glass, so you could see the entirety of the kennel from outside of it. Also of interest, we only had one other guy staffed at the vet clinic, and he was about 5'10" in height. So, I brought out the first dog, and there was lots of happy yelping and husky talk. Those of you who own huskies know what I mean, when the dog was reunited with family. I brought up the second dog, and he or she was very reserved, tail wagging, and just generally happy. The owners didn't say a lot to me, other than thanks and have a good day, and they didn't stay long once they had their dogs back. We generally had owners pay first before we brought dogs up from the kennels, because it made it easier for the owners to not have to juggle their wallets and an excited dog. Task done, I went back to the kennels to clean up and get it ready for the next round of dogs to come in. I grabbed the spray bottle of disinfectant and made ready to clean the walls. And that's when I saw it. High up above me, about 15 feet up on the back wall, was a human handprint. And it wasn't a standard size either. It was huge. Looking at it, I was thoroughly creeped out and got the handprint wiped off the stainless steel quickly using a multi-step stool. I'm 5'5". I told my coworkers and the vet techs about it, and they were creeped out too and asked me not to bring it up again. I was the only one working kennels that morning. Between bringing up the last dog and returning to the kennels, there was not enough time for our only male staff member to run in, jump up, and leave a single handprint. I asked him later if he'd been in the kennels at all, and he said no. Apparently around that time, he was doing intake in a vet room. And like I said, the handprint was too big to belong to any normal-sized human. And that's the story of how I inadvertently took care of a well-behaved werewolf for the weekend. About 5 years back, my close friends and some of my family rented a cabin in Zion National Park. It was a beautiful wooden cabin on a cliff overlooking a valley. We were the only occupied cabin of two in a very isolated area. One of my close friends had recently lost her husband in an unexpected way, leaving behind a young daughter. She was hesitant to come with us due to the recent loss, but also because Zion was their last major trip together. Regardless, she pulled herself together and made the trip with us. Our first night there, we decided to tell ghost stories. It's the only logical thing to do in a massive cabin in the middle of nowhere. My friend shared her experience regarding her daughter. The loss of her husband was hard on both of them. She shared with us that her daughter sees him almost daily. She was about 3 or 4 at the time. Her daughter would often have conversations and say things such as, "He's waving to us," or "He's sitting next to us." My friend continued and asked us why he had not shown himself to her, in person or in her dreams. Anything to let her know that he was okay. We informed her that he would show himself when he was ready. The night continued. My sister and her husband were in the living room on their phones. The rest of us were in the kitchen cooking dinner and chatting. Dinner was almost ready, so I went to the living room to let my sister and brother-in-law know. Both of them were quiet, looking at their phones. My brother-in-law looked up and said, "I think someone's here." And my sister confirmed, "Yeah, I saw it too." They described what they saw. He said he saw a torso and head float by and go into the restroom, and my sister confirmed. Both were trying not to panic in order not to freak everyone out. Soon after, the bathroom door opens and it's my friend. She faintly overheard what we were talking about and asked what they saw. My brother-in-law and sister described it to her again. A silhouette of a man, just a torso and head, which went into the restroom where my friend was at. By this time, everyone in the cabin was anxiously listening. My friend began crying. It was her husband, she said. And when he passed, he was an organ donor. They took his arms and legs for harvesting. This happened on the way to EMS class about 4 years ago. I've been looking for somewhere to post ever since. I'm hoping to find others who experience the same thing, or something similar. I was driving, and my brother was in the passenger seat, reading the assigned chapter for that week out loud. We were coming up on an exit when I saw the thing coming down the eastbound freeway ramp. I have to call it a thing because I have no idea what I saw. It moved so fast. To give an idea how fast, we were about 50 yards away, and I saw it at the same time I heard it zip by. It looked like a ripple, like if you saw a heat distortion, but throttling forward. It registered as a momentary blur. I don't have a reference for what I saw, so my brain instantly tried to reject it. It happened so fast I didn't even react, not so much as a "what the fuck." I didn't even mention it. I will say this though, traffic was heavy enough that it seems unlikely no one else saw, and I'm baffled that it could maneuver at that speed without colliding with other vehicles. I didn't think about it again until the next time we passed that exit, but even then, I thought about it for maybe a second. When we passed by the exit again about a week later, my brother blindsided me. He said, "Bro, we have to talk about that blur." Apparently, he looked up from his book and saw the same thing I did, but his take was a bit different. He claimed that he'd been trying to talk to me about it all week, but every time he tried, his whole train of thought derailed. His take definitely gave me the creeps though. He believed that whatever we saw was actively trying to make us forget about it. He also said that he'd practiced saying the phrase, "We have to talk about that blur," several times that day, just to make sure that we talked about it. My best guess is that we saw an alien vehicle. I wish I had more to say on this, but it's all I have. If this has ever happened to you, I'd love to hear about it.